She served coffee to the man who destroyed her family, and he had no idea the waitress holding his future was about to flip his world upside down. The same hands that once scrubbed the floors of his bank now controlled the company he desperately needed. But what happened next wasn't just business. It was 10 years of buried pain served ice cold. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you looked or where you came from? Hi, viewers. Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Follow along as we watch the most satisfying takedown in business history. One that started with spilled coffee and ended with a love story nobody saw coming. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Grant Ellison stepped into the Buckhead Country Club like he owned the marble floors beneath his Italian leather shoes. He probably could have bought the place twice over without checking his bank account. The kind of man who made million-dollar decisions before his morning coffee cooled. He tossed his jacket toward the nearest server without looking. Just assumed someone would catch it. That someone was Kiera Monroe. She caught the jacket with one hand while balancing a coffee pot in the other. Smooth as silk. The kind of grace that comes from years of working multiple jobs, making every movement count. Thanks, sweetheart, Grant muttered, already scanning the room for more important faces. Kiera smiled. The kind of smile that could mean anything. What Grant didn't know was that the woman in the black server uniform had spent 3 years building the hottest logistics company in the Southeast. What he didn't know was that she'd been fielding calls from venture capitalists all week, including one very persistent email from a certain real estate mogul named Grant Ellison. What he definitely didn't know was that she remembered him. 10 years ago, Grant's holding company had foreclosed on a small house in Detroit. Nothing special about the deal, just another property in a declining neighborhood. Except that house belonged to Kiera's mother, and losing it had nearly broken the woman who'd raised 3 kids on her own. But this wasn't about revenge. Not yet. This was about business. Kiera moved through the room like water, refilling cups and clearing plates. Invisible in the way service workers always are to people with too much money and too little awareness. She listened to conversations about stock options and tax shelters. Watched grown men compete over who could name-drop the biggest clients. The Monroe woman is supposed to be here today, said a blonde address that cost more than most people's rent. Though I heard she's not much to look at. Probably one of those tech nerds who thinks hoodies count as business casual. Her friend laughed. As long as her numbers are real, who cares? Though honestly, I'm surprised Grant's interested. Usually he goes for the sure things. Kiera kept pouring coffee, kept smiling. Grant settled into his chair at the head table, immediately commanding attention. He had that kind of presence, the kind that made rooms quieter just by existing in them. Tall enough to look down on most people, built like he still hit the gym despite pushing 40. The kind of confidence that money couldn't buy, but sure helped maintain. Ladies and gentlemen, Grant began, his voice carrying easily across the room. We're here today because Atlanta is becoming the new hub for innovative companies. Black-owned businesses especially are showing incredible growth potential. Kiera paused mid-pour. Interesting choice of words. I've been courting one company in particular, Grant continued. Monroe Logistics. Revolutionary approach to supply chain management. The kind of authentic leadership this city needs. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. A junior investor leaned toward his companion. Hope the help doesn't spill anything on Grant's suit. That thing probably costs more than she makes a month. More laughter. The kind that comes easy when you've never worried about rent money. Kiera set down the coffee pot and reached in her apron pocket. Her fingers found the printed email she'd been carrying all morning. Grant's own words, black ink on white paper. Ms. Monroe, your company represents exactly the kind of innovative, authentic leadership I want to support. I would be honored to discuss potential partnership opportunities. Respectfully, Grant Ellison. The live stream cameras from the Atlanta Business Podcast were rolling. Perfect. 18 minutes into Grant's speech about supporting diverse entrepreneurs, Kiera made her move. She walked to his table, placed the folded paper next to his water glass. Your coffee's getting cold, Mr. Ellison, she said quietly. Grant glanced at the paper, then at her. Really looked at her for the first time. Something in her voice made him unfold it. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, something close to panic. The room fell silent. Even the servers stopped moving. Sometimes, Kiera said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet, leadership shows up in sneakers. She gestured toward her feet. Thrift store Converse, clean but obviously secondhand. I'm Kay, Monroe, Mr. Ellison. The one you've been emailing. The one whose authentic leadership you've been praising. She paused, letting it sink in. The one you just called to help. Grant's mouth opened, closed, opened again. The cameras kept rolling. I came here today to meet my potential investors face to face, Kiera continued. To see if you could recognize value when it wasn't wearing a designer label. To see if your commitment to supporting Black entrepreneurs was real or just good PR. She picked up the coffee pot again. Topped off his cup. Looks like I have my answer. The blonde socialite looked like she'd swallowed something sour. The junior investor was suddenly very interested in his phone. Grant finally found his voice. Ms. Monroe, there's been a misunderstanding. Has there? Kiera asked, because from where I'm standing, everything seems pretty clear. She turned to address the room, her voice steady and sure. For those of you watching the live stream, this is what happens when you judge a book by its cover. When you assume service workers are less than. When you confuse a uniform with a person's worth. The blonde socialite's friend whispered something about lawsuits. About reputation damage. Kiera heard her, smiled that same mysterious smile. Don't worry, she said. I'm not interested in destroying anyone. I'm interested in building something. The question is whether any of you are ready to build with someone who started from the bottom. She set the coffee pot down for the last time. Mr. Ellison, you have my contact information. When you're ready to have a real conversation, one where you look me in the eye from the start, give me a call. The room stayed frozen as she walked toward the exit. Grant's voice stopped her at the door. Ms. Monroe. She turned. That email, he said. Every word was true. For the first time that day, Kiera's smile reached her eyes. I guess we'll find out. What would you do if someone dismissed you based on your clothes, only to discover you held their future in your hands? Have you ever been underestimated because of how you looked? Drop a comment below about a time someone judged you wrong. The door closed behind her, but the real story was just beginning. Because Grant Ellison wasn't just any investor. He was the man who'd helped destroy her family 10 years ago. And she was about to discover that some coincidences aren't coincidences at all. Grant sat in his Tesla for 20 minutes after the brunch ended, staring at his phone screen. Kiera Monroe's LinkedIn profile glowed back at him. Georgia Tech graduate, 3 successful exits, portfolio worth 8 figures. The same woman who just served him coffee and schooled him in front of Atlanta's business elite. He made a lot of mistakes in 41 years. Most of them involved money, power, or women who wanted both. But this felt different. This felt like karma had a sense of humor. The livestream video already had 50,000 views. His phone buzzed. Text after text. Saw the video. Brutal, man. Is this real? Did you really not know who she was? Paranoid, mer. Call me. Grant ignored them all. There was only one call he needed to make. Ellison Properties, this is... Marcus, it's me. I need you to pull everything on K. Monroe Logistics. Financial records, business registration, employee count. Everything. Grant? You sound weird. Are you okay? Just do it. He hung up and Googled her name. Page after page of business articles. Awards for innovation. Features in Black Enterprise and Forbes. How had he missed this? The answer hit him like ice water. He never bothered looking at photos. In every business profile, she was either quoted anonymously or photographed from behind, working with her team. She'd kept herself deliberately invisible while building an empire. Smart. Calculating. Everything he claimed to admire in business. His phone rang. Marcus. Grant. This woman is the real deal. Revenue projections through the roof. Client retention at 96%. Whatever happened between you two, fix it. Grant didn't answer. He was staring at another search result. An old Detroit Free Press article from 2014. Local family loses home in foreclosure wave. The photo made his stomach drop. A younger Kiera Monroe stood next to an older woman on the steps of a small house. The caption identified them as Kiera and her mother, Denise Monroe. The house behind them looked tired but loved, flower boxes in the windows, a small garden along the front walk. He remembered the property, one of dozens his holding company had acquired during Detroit's decline. Nothing personal, just business. The previous owner had been 3 months behind on payments. Standard procedure. Except now he could see the faces behind the paperwork. Grant drove home on autopilot, his mind spinning. His penthouse overlooked downtown Atlanta's glittering skyline, all glass and steel, and the kind of view that usually made him feel invincible. Tonight it just felt empty. He poured 3 fingers of bourbon and opened his laptop. Pulled up the email thread with K. Monroe Logistics. Their correspondence had started 6 weeks ago. Professional. Courteous. She'd been recommended by another portfolio company, described as brilliant but selective. Someone who could revolutionize supply chain logistics for his retail properties. He'd been impressed by her responses. Direct without being cold. Visionary without being unrealistic. The kind of business partner he'd been looking for. He'd never asked for a photo. Never requested a video call. In an industry where people judge deals based on golf handicaps and school ties, he'd actually focused on the work. Right up until he'd treated her like hired help. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mr. Ellison, this is Kiera Monroe. I believe we have unfinished business. Grant stared at the message, typed and deleted 3 different responses. Finally, when and where? Tomorrow, 7 p.m. The Optimist in West End. Come alone. He knew the restaurant. Good food, but not the kind of place where million-dollar deals usually happened. Definitely not his usual scene. I'll be there. And Mr. Ellison? Dress down. Tonight, you're my neighborhood. Grant set down his phone and walked to his closet. Rows of custom suits stared back at him. Armani, Tom Ford, Brioni. The armor of success. For the first time in years, he had no idea what to wear. He pulled out jeans he'd bought but never worn. A simple button-down shirt. Looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. This wasn't about clothes. This was about something much more complicated. Because somewhere between reading her emails and watching that video, Grant realized he wasn't just interested in her business anymore. He was interested in her. The woman who'd outmaneuvered him without breaking a sweat. Who'd turned his own words into weapons and used them with surgical precision. Who'd walked out of that room like she owned it, because she did. But there was something else in those search results. Something that made his chest tight. The foreclosure notice was dated October 15th, 2014. Kiera's mother had lost the house 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. The same month, Kiera had graduated from Georgia Tech with a degree in industrial engineering and a full scholarship to MIT's graduate program. She'd given up graduate school to take care of her mother, to rebuild what his company had helped destroy. Grant finished his bourbon and poured another. Tomorrow night, he'd sit across from Kiera Monroe in her neighborhood, at her choice of restaurant, playing by her rules. For the first time in his adult life, he was walking into a meeting where he wasn't the one holding all the cards. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like the first interesting challenge he'd had in years. Have you ever realized you misjudged someone completely? When the person you dismissed turned out to be exactly what you didn't know you were looking for? Share your story below. But as Grant got ready for bed, one question kept nagging at him. Did Kiera Monroe know who he was when she served him coffee? Or was their meeting really just coincidence? By tomorrow night, he'd have his answer, whether he was ready for it or not. The Optimist buzzed with the kind of energy that comes from actual community, not manufactured networking. Families sharing tables, friends catching up over craft cocktails, servers who knew regular customers by name. Grant arrived 10 minutes early and immediately felt overdressed in his casual jeans and button-down. Everyone else looked effortlessly comfortable in their own skin. He never noticed how much space he usually took up in rooms, how his presence changed conversations. Here, he was just another guy waiting for a table. Kiera walked in at exactly 7 o'clock. She wore dark jeans that fit like they were made for her, and a soft gray sweater that somehow made her look both approachable and untouchable. Her hair fell in natural waves around her shoulders. No power suit, no armor. She was beautiful in the kind of way that caught you off guard. Mr. Ellison. She extended her hand like they were meeting for the first time. Grant, please. Her handshake was firm, confident, professional, but her eyes held something else, like she was studying him, collecting data. They followed the hostess to a corner table, quiet enough for conversation, public enough to keep things civilized. Nice place, Grant said, looking around. Real people eat here, Kiera replied. Not a networking opportunity in sight. Direct hit. He deserved that. They ordered drinks. She asked for a glass of wine. He stuck with water. Needed to keep his head clear. So, Kiera said, settling back in her chair, how does it feel to be internet famous? Grant's phone had been buzzing all day. The video had hit 6 figures in views, spawned dozens of think pieces about privilege and assumptions. His PR team was in full damage control mode. Humbling, he said honestly. Good. Humility looks better on you than arrogance. She wasn't making this easy. He appreciated that, even if it stung. I owe you an apology, Grant said. What happened today was inexcusable. Which part? Throwing your jacket at me like I was furniture? Talking about authentic leadership while treating service workers like they're invisible? Or the part where you spent 18 minutes praising my work without bothering to look at the woman serving your coffee? Each word landed like a precision strike. All of it, Grant said. There's no excuse for any of it. Kiera studied him over her wine glass. You know what's interesting? I've been watching the comments on that live stream. Half the people are calling you out for being a privileged jerk. The other half are defending you, saying you couldn't have known. What do you think? I think you're used to people telling you what you want to hear. I think you spent so long being the most important person in every room that you forgot to see the people who weren't. The server approached. A young black man with an easy smile. Y'all ready to order? Grant watched Kiera interact with him, asked about his classes at Georgia State, remembered that he was saving for his mom's birthday, treated him like a human being whose life mattered. Everything Grant should have done that morning. After they ordered, Kiera leaned forward. Tell me about Detroit, she said. Grant's blood went cold. What about Detroit? Your holding company acquired a lot of properties there in 2014. Tough market. I'm sure the numbers made sense. She knew. Of course she knew. Kiera. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep that house, she continued, her voice steady but sharp. Cleaned office buildings until midnight, then got up at 5 to work at a diner. Also me and my brothers could have something stable. Grant felt the ground shifting beneath him. She was never late on a payment until she got sick. Pneumonia that turned into something worse. 3 weeks in a hospital, no insurance. By the time she got back to work, it was too late. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. You never looked at the faces behind the paperwork. Just another property in a declining market, right? Grant wanted to explain the business logic, the economic pressures, the impossible mathematics of urban decay. But sitting across from her, all those justifications turned to ash. You want to know the real story? Kiera asked. She never got over losing that house. Spent the last 10 years feeling like she'd failed us. Died last year, still apologizing for not being able to leave us anything. The words hit Grant like physical blows. But here's what she did leave me, Kiera continued. She taught me that your work is your worth. That you treat everyone with dignity, no matter what they do for a living. That success means lifting people up, not stepping over them. Grant's throat felt tight. I'm sorry. For your loss. For everything. I don't want your pity, Kiera said. I want you to understand what happened today. You didn't just embarrass yourself. You proved everything my mother believed about people like you. The food arrived, but neither of them touched it. So why am I here? Grant asked, if you hate everything I represent, why agree to meet? Kiera smiled for the first time that evening. Not friendly, but not cruel either. Because I looked up your personal history. Your father was a construction worker. Your mother cleaned houses. You grew up in a trailer park in Alabama. Grant's jaw tightened. He'd spent years burying those details. You made yourself forget where you came from, Kiera continued. But I think maybe you can remember. And if you can remember, maybe you can change. And if I can't, Then you'll stay exactly who you were this morning. Rich, successful, and completely hollow. She stood up, leaving her food untouched. I'll give you 1 week to decide who you want to be, Grant Ellison. You know how to reach me. Grant watched her walk away, feeling like he'd been stripped down to his bones. His phone buzzed. A text from Kiera. By the way, I knew exactly who you were the moment you walked into that brunch. The question is, do you? Have you ever had someone hold up a mirror to show you who you'd become? When was the last time someone challenged you to be better instead of just telling you what you wanted to hear? Comment below about a time someone changed your perspective. Grant sat alone with 2 full plates of food and the uncomfortable realization that he was falling for the woman who had every reason to destroy him. Grant didn't sleep for 3 days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Kiera's face across that restaurant table. The way she'd looked at him, not with hatred, but with something worse. Disappointment. He'd built an empire by never second-guessing himself. Confidence was currency in his world. But now every decision felt shaky, every interaction suspect. Thursday morning, he walked past the executive bathroom mirror and barely recognized himself. When was the last time he'd looked tired? When was the last time anything had kept him up at night? His assistant, Rachel, knocked on his office door. The PR team wants another meeting about damage control, she said carefully. And you have 17 interview requests about the video. Cancel everything. Sir, I said cancel everything. Clear my calendar. Rachel hesitated in the doorway. She'd worked for him for 6 years, had never seen him like this. Is there anything I can do? Grant looked at her, really looked. Mid-30s, always perfectly professional, the kind of competence he usually took for granted. Rachel, do I treat you well? She blinked, clearly caught off guard. Ah, yes, sir. You've always been fair. But do I see you? As a person, not just someone who manages my schedule. The pause was answer enough. Tell me something about yourself, Grant said. Something that has nothing to do with work. Rachel shifted uncomfortably. I'm not sure. Please. I paint. Watercolors. Mostly landscapes. I have a studio apartment, but I've turned the whole living room into a workspace. Grant realized he'd never known this. 6 years of 40-hour weeks, and he'd never asked about her life outside these walls. Are you any good? A small smile crossed her face. I think so. I've sold a few pieces at local galleries. That's incredible. Why didn't I know this? Rachel's smile faded. You never asked. The words hung between them like an indictment. That afternoon, Grant drove through neighborhoods he'd only seen on demographic reports. West End, where Kiera had chosen their restaurant. East Atlanta, where she'd grown up before Detroit. Communities his investment firm had analyzed but never actually visited. He stopped at a coffee shop in Virginia Highland, the kind of place where people worked on laptops and had conversations about art instead of stock prices. The barista was a college kid with paint under her fingernails. What can I get you? Just coffee. Black. She poured it with the kind of care that suggested she took pride in the work. Like Kiera had, serving tables with grace while running a $1 million company. You're not from around here, the barista said. Not rude, just observant. What makes you say that? The way you look around. Like you're seeing everything for the first time. Grant paid and found a corner table. Opened his laptop and did something he'd never done before. Researched Kiera Monroe not as a business prospect, but as a person. Her company's website featured testimonials from small business owners across the Southeast. Mom-and-pop shops, family restaurants, local craftspeople. All talking about how Monroe Logistics had saved their businesses, helped them compete with bigger companies. She built something beautiful. Something that mattered. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Need a decision on the Monroe deal. Board meeting Monday. Grant stared at the message. 2 weeks ago, acquiring her company had seemed like smart business. Now it felt like something else entirely. He spent Friday at the Georgia Tech Library, reading everything he could find about supply chain innovation, community development, social entrepreneurship. Subjects he'd dismissed as soft business for most of his career. By Saturday, he had a plan. Sunday evening, he drove to Kiera's neighborhood. Not to her house. He wasn't ready for that level of presumption. But to the community center where, according to local news articles, she volunteered teaching business skills to young entrepreneurs. The building was old brick, well-maintained, but clearly operating on a limited budget. Through the windows, he could see a dozen people sitting around tables, laptops open, notebooks filled with ideas. Kiera moved between the tables, offering advice, encouragement, practical wisdom. She wore jeans and sneakers, her hair pulled back, completely in her element. Grant watched her work for an hour, watched her light up when someone shared a breakthrough, watched her patiently explain financial projections to a teenager with a food truck dream. This was who she really was. Not the woman who'd schooled him at that brunch, though she was capable of that too. This was her authentic self, building up instead of tearing down. His phone buzzed. He looked down and back up to find Kiera standing outside the community center, looking directly at him through his windshield. She walked to his car. He rolled down the window. "You know, there are laws about stalking," she said, but her tone wasn't angry. "I wasn't. I was just." "You were just what?" Grant turned off the engine. "Trying to understand who you really are. And I think I'm starting to." Kiera studied his face. Something in her expression softened slightly. "There's a diner 3 blocks from here. Real food, not fancy. You hungry?" Grant nodded. "Follow me." And Grant, "Yeah." This time, try to remember that everyone deserves respect, no matter what they're wearing. Have you ever had someone give you a second chance you weren't sure you deserved? When was the last time someone saw potential in you, even after you'd messed up? Share your story below. As Grant followed her taillights through the streets of her neighborhood, he realized something had shifted. This wasn't about business anymore. This wasn't even about making amends for the past. This was about the woman who was teaching him to see the world differently, one conversation at a time. The diner smelled like bacon grease and possibility. Red vinyl booths, checkered floors, the kind of place where coffee cups never went empty and everyone called you honey. Kiera slid into a booth by the window. Grant sat across from her, feeling more nervous than he had in 20 years. "Dolores," Kiera called to the woman behind the counter. "You still got that peach pie?" "Baby girl, I saved you the last slice. Knew you'd be by tonight." The easy familiarity hit Grant in the chest. This was her community, her people, and somehow she'd invited him into it. "So," Kiera said, settling back against the vinyl, "what did you learn from your weekend stalking mission?" "That you're incredible." The words tumbled out before he could stop them. Kiera raised an eyebrow. "Careful. Flattery won't work on me. I'm not trying to flatter you. I'm trying to understand how someone builds what you've built while staying connected to where they came from." Dolores appeared with coffee and pie. She looked Grant up and down with the frank assessment of someone who'd seen every type of person walk through her doors. "You that man from the video?" she asked. Grant's face heated. "Yes, ma'am." Dolores looked at Kiera. "You sure about this one, baby?" "We'll see," Kiera said diplomatically. Dolores walked away, but Grant caught her shaking her head. "She's protective," Kiera explained. "This whole neighborhood watched me grow up. They remember when I came back from Detroit with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. What happened? After the house." Kiera cut into her pie, took a deliberate bite. "You really want to know?" "Yes. My mother got depressed. Really depressed. Stopped eating, stopped talking. I deferred MIT to take care of her. Got a job at a logistics company. Worked my way up while she worked her way back to herself." She paused, looking out the window at the quiet street. "Took 3 years. 3 years of watching the strongest woman I knew blame herself for something that wasn't her fault. 3 years of me working double shifts and taking night classes, determined to build something that couldn't be taken away." Grant felt the weight of his role in that pain. "She must be proud of what you've accomplished." She was. Before she died, she got to see the company featured in Black Enterprise. Got to see me speak at conferences, mentor other entrepreneurs. She died knowing her daughter was somebody. The grief in her voice was fresh, real. "I'm sorry," Grant said, "for your loss, and for my part in her pain. You want to know something weird?" Kiera looked directly at him. "I used to hate you. Spent years imagining what I'd say if I ever met the people who destroyed our family. And now I'm sitting across from you wondering if you're actually capable of change." Their eyes met across the table. Something passed between them. Not forgiveness, but possibility. I've been thinking, Grant said, about your business, about what you've built. Kiera's expression shifted slightly, back to business mode. And I don't want to acquire your company. She blinked, clearly not expecting that. Excuse me, I want to partner with you. Equal partners. Your vision, my resources. Building something neither of us could create alone. Kiera set down her fork. That's a very different proposition. It's the right proposition. You don't need my money to succeed. You've already proven that. But together, we could scale your model across the Southeast, create thousands of jobs, support hundreds of small businesses. And you'd get what out of this partnership? Grant smiled. The chance to be part of something that actually matters. Kiera studied him for a long moment. 2 weeks ago, I would have laughed at that answer, called it corporate speak. And now I'm wondering if you mean it. The conversation continued over second cups of coffee. Grant found himself talking about things he never discussed, his childhood in Alabama, the shame he'd felt about his parents' jobs, the way success had slowly isolated him from real human connection. Kiera listened without judgment, asked questions that made him think deeper. You know what your real problem is? She said finally. Tell me. You forgot that business is about people. You started treating it like a game where numbers matter more than the humans behind them. And you never forgot. Couldn't afford to. When you grow up watching your mother work 3 jobs just to keep a roof over your head, you never forget that every decision affects real families. As they prepared to leave, Dolores approached their table. Y'all want some advice from an old woman who's seen everything? They nodded. People can change, she said, looking directly at Grant. But they have to want to, and they have to prove it with actions, not just words. She turned to Kiera. And you, baby girl, don't let what happened to your mama make you afraid to trust when someone shows you they're trying to be better. Outside the diner, they stood by their cars in the parking lot. The night air was cool, filled with the sounds of the neighborhood settling into evening. So what happens now? Grant asked. Now you go home and think about whether you really want to change your entire approach to business, Kiera said. And I go home and think about whether I believe you actually can. And then we'll see if this partnership idea is real or just another way for you to get what you want. But as she said it, Kiera smiled. The first genuinely warm smile she'd given him. Have you ever found yourself attracted to someone who challenged everything you thought you knew about yourself? When was the last time someone made you want to be better than you were? Drop a comment about a person who changed your perspective on what really matters. Grant watched her drive away, feeling like he was standing at the edge of something that could either save him or destroy everything he'd built. For the first time in his life, the risk felt worth taking. 3 days later, Kiera showed up at Grant's office unannounced. Rachel looked up from her desk with barely concealed surprise. Ms. Monroe? Mr. Ellison didn't mention. He's expecting me. Kiera lied smoothly. She wasn't, but she'd spent the weekend thinking about their conversation, about partnership possibilities, about the way Grant had looked at her in that diner, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. Grant's office door opened before Rachel could call him. Kiera. He stood there in his shirt sleeves, no jacket, tie loosened. Human for once. This is unexpected. I hope you don't mind. I was in the neighborhood. His building was in Buckhead. Her office was in Midtown. They both knew she'd driven 20 minutes out of her way. Commane. His office was everything she'd expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive art, furniture that cost more than most people's cars. But there were new additions. Books about community development stacked on his desk. A notebook filled with what looked like her company's logistics model, written in his handwriting. You've been studying, she observed. Trying to understand your approach. How you've managed to grow without losing your values. Kiera walked to the window, looking out at the city spread below. From up here, Atlanta looked manageable, controllable. Nothing like the messy, complicated reality of actual neighborhoods. So what's your verdict? She asked. Ready to leave your ivory tower and get your hands dirty? Grant joined her at the window, standing close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive but subtle. Clean. I want to show you something, he said. He led her to a conference room where architectural plans covered a large table. She recognized the building immediately, the old textile factory in West End, 3 blocks from the community center where she volunteered. "You bought the Morrison building?" she asked. "Last week. I want to turn it into a logistics hub. Small business incubator on the first floor, warehouse, and distribution on the second and third floors. Your company would run the whole operation." Kiera studied the plans. They were good, really good. Someone had thought about traffic flow, community impact, job creation. "This is impressive," she admitted, "but it's also expensive. What's the real play here, Grant?" He moved closer, his shoulder brushing hers as he pointed to a section of the blueprint. "The real play is proving that business can lift communities instead of exploiting them. That profit and purpose don't have to be enemies." The contact sent electricity through her skin. She stepped back, needing distance to think clearly. "And you think this building proves that?" "I think it's a start." Kiera looked at him, really looked. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms she hadn't noticed before. Strong hands that had probably never done manual labor, but somehow looked capable anyway. "There's one condition," she said. "Name it. I won't work the floor. Not just manage from an office, but actually work alongside the people we hire. If we're going to talk about authentic leadership, I need to stay connected to the actual work." Grant smiled. "I wouldn't expect anything less." Their eyes met across the conference table. The air between them felt charged, dangerous. "Kiera," Grant said, his voice dropping lower, "there's something else we need to talk about." "What?" "This partnership we're discussing. It's going to require a lot of time together. Late nights, close collaboration, decisions that affect both our companies. I'm aware. I need you to know that my interest isn't purely professional anymore." The admission hung between them like a live wire. "Grant, I'm attracted to you. Have been since that first day, even when you were serving me coffee and I was too blind to see who you really were." Kiera felt her pulse quicken. She'd sensed the attraction, felt it herself, but hearing him say it made everything more real, more complicated. "That's not smart," she said. "Probably not. It could destroy the partnership before it starts." "It could. So why tell me?" Grant moved around the table toward her. "Because I don't want there to be any confusion about my motivations. I'm not pursuing this business deal to get close to you. I'm pursuing you despite the business complications." He stopped just close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "What if I told you the feeling was mutual?" she asked. "Is it?" Instead of answering with words, Kiera reached up and straightened his tie. Her fingers brushed against his chest, felt his sharp intake of breath. "This is dangerous territory," she murmured. "The most worthwhile things usually are." His hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his chest. His heart was beating fast, matching her own. "If we do this," Kiera said, "we do it right. No games, no power plays, no using business to manipulate personal feelings." "Agreed. And if it doesn't work out, we don't let it destroy what we're trying to build professionally." "Agreed." She started to step back, but Grant's other hand found her waist, holding her gently in place. "Kiera." "Yes. I know I have no right to ask this, considering our history. But would you have dinner with me? Not as business partners. As two people who are attracted to each other and want to see where it leads." She should say no, should maintain professional boundaries, protect herself from getting involved with someone who represented everything that had hurt her family. Instead, she found herself nodding. "Saturday night," she said, "but I picked the place." "Deal." This time when she stepped back, he let her go. "And Grant." "Yeah. Don't think this means I'm going easy on you. In business or anything else." His smile was slow, appreciative. "I wouldn't want it any other way. Have you ever been attracted to someone you knew you shouldn't want? When chemistry and logic went to war in your heart?" Share below about a time attraction complicated your life in the most beautiful way. As Kiera left his office, she caught her reflection in the elevator doors. Flushed cheeks, bright eyes, the unmistakable look of a woman walking into something that could either be the best decision of her life or her biggest mistake. Either way, Saturday couldn't come fast enough. Saturday night, Kiera chose a jazz club in East Atlanta, the kind of place where music mattered more than profit margins, and people came to feel something real. She arrived first, claimed a table near the stage, and ordered a drink she didn't need. Liquid courage for a date she wasn't sure was smart. Grant walked in 10 minutes later, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Dark jeans, gray sweater that probably cost more than her car payment, but somehow he made it look effortless. Every woman in the room noticed him, but his eyes found only her. "Nice choice," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "I've never been here before. Most people in your tax bracket haven't." Ouch. But he was smiling. "Are you going to spend the whole night reminding me I'm rich?" "Maybe. Is that going to be a problem?" The band started playing smooth. Everything. Start with why you really came to that brunch. The real reason, not the official story. Kiera sipped her wine, considering. "You want the truth?" "Always. I was curious about you. I'd read articles, seen interviews, but I want to know if the Grant Ellison who wrote those emails was real or just good marketing." "And your conclusion?" "Still deciding." The music wrapped around them, intimate and warm. Other couples swayed on the small dance floor, lost in each other and the rhythm. "What about you?" Kiera asked. "What's the real story behind your success? The version that doesn't make it into Forbes profiles?" Grant's expression shifted, became more guarded. "What do you mean?" "I mean, most people don't build empires unless they're running from something or toward something. Which is it for you?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Both," he finally said, "running from a kid who wore the same 3 shirts to school, toward a life where money never controls my choices. And now I'm wondering if I ran so far from poverty that I forgot about humanity." The honesty in his voice made her chest tight. "Dance with me," Grant said suddenly. "I don't really." "Please." He stood, extended his hand. She looked at it for a long moment. Strong fingers, no wedding ring, hands that had built fortunes but were now asking for something much simpler. She took it. On the dance floor, Grant pulled her close, but not too close. Respectful distance. But she could feel the heat of his body, smell that clean cologne that was becoming familiar. "You're full of surprises," she said as they moved to the music. "Good surprises or bad surprises?" "Jury's still out." He spun her gently, brought her back into his arms. This time the distance was smaller. "Kiera, I need you to know something." She looked up at him, caught by the seriousness in his voice. "What?" "This isn't some rich guy trying to add a trophy to his collection. This isn't about conquest or novelty or whatever you might be thinking." "What is it about?" His hand tightened slightly on her waist. "It's about the fact that you've turned my entire world upside down in 2 weeks. It's about how you make me want to be better than I've ever been." The saxophone swelled around them, and suddenly the careful distance was gone. She was pressed against his chest, his arms fully around her, moving together like they'd been dancing for years. "This is moving fast," she whispered. "Too fast." She should say yes. Should protect herself, maintain boundaries, think with her head instead of a racing heart. "Ask me tomorrow," she said instead. Grant's laugh was low, rumbling through his chest into hers. "Fair enough." When the song ended, they stayed on the floor for another, and another. By the 3rd song, Kiera had stopped thinking about anything except the way Grant's hands fell on her back, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. "I should go," she said finally, though her body argued against the words. "Should you?" "Yes." "This is intense." "It is." But neither of them moved. They stood there on the edge of the dance floor, close enough to kiss, tension crackling between them like electricity. "Grant, I know we should take this slow. Be smart about it. But," his thumb traced along her jawline, gentle but possessive. "But I haven't felt this alive in years. And the way you're looking at me right now makes me think maybe you haven't either." He was right. Every nerve ending in her body was awake, aware, wanting. "One kiss," she heard herself say. Just to see, he agreed. But when his lips met hers, there was nothing tentative about it. The kiss was heat and hunger and everything they'd been dancing around for weeks. His hand tangled in her hair. Her fingers gripped his sweater, and for a moment the rest of the world disappeared completely. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Well," Kiera said unsteadily, "that complicates things. Spectacularly." They walked to their cars in charged silence. At her door, Grant caught her hand. "Kiera, yeah, I meant what I said in there. About this being real." She looked at their joined hands, then back up at his face. "I believe you. That's what scares me. When was the last time a kiss changed everything? When physical attraction became emotional connection, and you knew there was no going back. Tell me in the comments about the moment you knew you were in trouble." Grant waited until she was safely in her car before walking to his own. But as Kiera drove home, she could still taste him, still feel his hands in her hair. Tomorrow, she'd have to figure out how to be his business partner when all she could think about was being something much more dangerous. Monday morning brought reality crashing back. Kiera sat in the conference room of Grant's building, surrounded by lawyers, accountants, and consultants who all looked like they'd stepped out of the same expensive catalog. The partnership papers spread across the mahogany table represented everything she'd worked for: financial security, growth potential, the chance to scale her vision across the Southeast. But every time Grant spoke, all she could think about was Saturday night. His hands on her waist. The way he'd kissed her like he'd been starving for it. "The profit-sharing structure is generous," her attorney was saying. 60-40 split, with you maintaining operational control. "It's unusual for the minority partner to retain that level of authority." Grant leaned forward. "Ms. Monroe's expertise is what makes this partnership valuable. I'm the investor, not the operator." Their eyes met across the table. Professional, careful, giving nothing away. But Kiera caught the way his gaze lingered on her mouth for just a split second too long. "There is one concern," Grant's lawyer interjected. "The Morrison building purchase is contingent on city approval for zoning changes. If that falls through—" "It won't," Kiera said firmly. "I've already spoken with 3 city council members. The community wants this project. You've been working on approvals without the partnership being finalized?" Grant's CFO looked skeptical. "I've been doing my job," Kiera replied coolly. "Building relationships, ensuring community buy-in, creating sustainable change instead of just throwing money at problems." The room fell silent. Grant's entire team was staring at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "That's exactly why this partnership works," Grant said quietly. "Ms. Monroe understands what I'm still learning. That successful business is about people, not just profit." After 2 hours of legal details, the meeting broke for lunch. Grant caught Kiera's elbow as everyone filed out. "Stay behind for a minute?" When they were alone, the professional mask slipped. "How are we going to do this?" Grant asked. "Do what?" "Work together every day when all I can think about is kissing you again." Heat pooled in Kiera's stomach. "We're going to be adults about it." "That's your plan? Be adults? Do you have a better idea?" Grant moved closer, backing her against the conference room window. Not touching, but close enough that she could feel his body heat. "My better idea involved a lot less adulting and a lot more of what happened Saturday night." "Grant." His name came out breathier than she intended. "Tell me you haven't been thinking about it too." She had. All weekend. Dreams filled with his hands, his mouth, the way he'd looked at her like she was everything he'd ever wanted. "What I think about on my own time is irrelevant," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" His hand came up to rest against the window beside her head, caging her in without actually touching her. The position was intimate, possessive, and it made her pulse race. "We signed papers 10 minutes ago, making us business partners," Kiera said. "That has to come first." "Does it?" "Yes. Because if we mess this up personally, we destroy something that could help hundreds of families build better lives." Grant studied her face, and she watched him wrestle with the logic she was trying to hold onto herself. "You're right," he said finally, but he didn't move away. "I know I am, but you're also driving me crazy." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. Then hers. Then the conference room door opened and Rachel poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but you both need to see this." They followed her to Grant's office, where his computer screen showed a local news website. Viral video, businessman in new controversy. The article featured photos from Saturday night. Grant and Kiera dancing, kissing, looking like two people completely lost in each other. Someone photographed us at the jazz club, Kiera said, her stomach sinking. Grant was already scrolling through the comments. They range from supportive to ugly, with plenty of speculation about gold diggers and power dynamics. This is going to complicate everything, Kiera said. Not necessarily. Grant, look at these comments. Half of them are calling me an opportunist who seduced you for business access. And the other half are calling it a beautiful love story. The optics are terrible. People will question every business decision we make, wondering if it's based on strategy or other factors. Grant closed the laptop, so we proved them wrong. How? By being transparent. By doing exactly what we said we'd do, building something that matters. By not letting other people's assumptions control our choices. Kiera wanted to believe it was that simple. But she'd spent her whole career fighting to be taken seriously in boardrooms full of men who already had reasons to dismiss her. I need some air, she said. Grant's office had a private balcony overlooking the city. She stepped outside, grateful for the cool breeze and space to think. He followed her, of course. Talk to me, he said. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Now every success will be attributed to sleeping my way to the top. Every failure will be blamed on mixing business with pleasure. Only if we let it be. Kiera turned to face him. You don't understand. You're a white man in a position of power. People will assume you're in control regardless. I'm a black woman who grew up poor. The assumptions about me are going to be very different. Grant's expression shifted as the reality of her position sank in. You're right. I didn't think about that. Because you don't have to. They stood in silence, the weight of complicated truths settling between them. So what do we do? Grant asked. We prove that our business relationship can succeed independently of whatever this is between us personally. And if I told you I don't want to pretend I'm not falling for you. The admission hit her like lightning. Have you ever had to choose between love and career? When success and your heart wanted different things? Comment below about the hardest choice you've ever had to make. Kiera looked at Grant standing there, vulnerable and honest, and everything she hadn't expected to want. Then we better make sure we're both worth falling for, she said. The city council meeting was standing room only. Kiera sat in the front row, presentation materials organized, community support letters stacked neatly beside her. 3 weeks of preparation had led to this moment. Approval for the Morrison Building project. Grant sat 2 rows behind her. They'd agreed he should maintain distance, let her be the face of the project. But she could feel his presence like heat on her back. Councilman Richards called the session to order. He'd been skeptical of the project from the beginning, worried about gentrification, about outside money changing the character of West End. First item is the zoning request for 1247 Morrison Avenue, Richards announced. Ms. Monroe, you have 15 minutes. Kiera stood, smoothed her blazer, and walked to the podium. The room buzzed with quiet conversation. Neighbors who'd known her for years, business owners who'd watched her company grow, reporters drawn by the viral photos. Good evening. I'm Kiera Monroe, founder of K. Monroe Logistics and lifelong resident of this community. She clicked to her first slide. Photos of the abandoned Morrison building, broken windows, and weeds growing through cracked concrete. For 5 years, this building has been nothing but an eyesore and a safety hazard. Tonight, I'm proposing we turn it into something that serves our community while creating good-paying jobs for our neighbors. The presentation was flawless. Financial projections, community impact studies, letters of support from local businesses. She'd done her homework. But Councilman Richards wasn't convinced. Ms. Monroe, this sounds wonderful in theory. But we've seen this before. Outside investors promising the world, then changing their minds when profits don't meet expectations. This is an outside investment, Kiera replied. This is partnership between my company, which has been serving this community for 3 years, and Ellison Properties, which is committed to long-term, sustainable development. About that partnership, Richards continued. Recent news reports suggest your business relationship with Mr. Ellison might be complicated. How do we know personal feelings won't cloud professional judgment? The question she'd been dreading. Kiera felt the room's attention sharpen, felt Grant tense behind her. Councilman Richards, my personal life has no bearing on my ability to create jobs and serve this community. The same community that watched me work 3 part-time jobs while building my company from nothing. But surely you can understand our concerns about conflicts of interest. No, actually I can't. The room went quiet. Kiera stepped away from the podium, closer to the council members. When male entrepreneurs partner with investors, nobody questions their personal relationships. Nobody suggests their business judgment is compromised by friendship, golf games, or shared interests. But a black woman starts dating her business partner, and suddenly her competence is suspect. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. I've presented you with 3 years of financial records showing steady growth and community investment. I brought you letters from 47 local businesses vouching for my work. I've shown you architectural plans that prioritize community needs over maximum profit. Her voice was steady, but fire burned underneath. If that's not enough to earn your trust, then tell me what else you need. But don't question my professionalism, because I'm a woman who dares to have both business success and a personal life. The room erupted in applause. Councilman Richards looked uncomfortable. Ms. Monroe, I meant no disrespect. Then vote on the merits of the project, not gossip about my dating life. She returned to the podium, clicked to her final slide. This building will create 150 jobs in the first year. It will provide affordable warehouse space for small businesses that can't compete with Amazon otherwise. It will generate tax revenue while keeping profit in our community instead of shipping it to corporate headquarters in other states. She looked directly at each council member. That's what matters. That's what you should vote on. The council deliberated for 20 minutes. When they returned, the vote was 6-1 in favor. Outside the building, community members surrounded Kiera with congratulations. Local business owners shook her hand, thanked her for standing up for the neighborhood. Grant waited until the crowd thinned before approaching. That was incredible, he said quietly. That was necessary. The way you handled Richards. The way I had to handle Richards. Kiera's adrenaline was still high. This is what I meant about different assumptions. You could have given the exact same presentation and nobody would have questioned your motives. Grant nodded, chastened. You're right. And I'm sorry you had to deal with that alone. I wasn't alone. This community had my back. They walked toward their cars in comfortable silence. The victory felt good, but Kiera knew it was just the beginning. So what happens now? Grant asked. Now we prove them right to trust us. We build something amazing and show them that good business and good intentions can coexist. And personally, Kiera stopped beside her car, looked at him in the parking lot lights. Personally, we figure out how to do this without letting other people's opinions control our choices. Grant stepped closer. I have an idea about that. Oh, what if we stopped hiding? What if we were completely transparent about the partnership and the relationship? Let our work speak for itself without trying to pretend we're not attracted to each other. That's risky. So, is pretending we don't want to be together. He had a point. The secret glances, the careful distance, the constant worry about who might be watching. It was exhausting. Okay, she said, but we do this right. Professional at work, personal on our own time, and always with the business as the priority. Deal. Grant leaned down and kissed her forehead, soft and sweet and completely appropriate for a public parking lot. Congratulations on tonight, he murmured against her skin. We did this together. No, tonight was all you. I just watched you be magnificent. Have you ever had to defend your competence because of who you loved? When your personal choices became public scrutiny? Share below about standing up for yourself when others questioned your judgment. As Kiera drove home, she realized something had shifted. She'd stopped hiding from Grant Ellison and started building something with him. The scary part was how right it felt. 6 weeks later, the Morrison building buzzed with controlled chaos. Construction workers restored century-old brick, installed new windows, converted forgotten spaces into something useful again. The sound of progress, hammers, saws, voices calling instructions, filled air that had been silent too long. Kiera wore steel-toed boots and a hard hat, walking the site with the foreman. She learned early that showing up, getting dirty, and understanding the actual work earned respect in ways conference room presentations never could. Second floor's ahead of schedule, Jimmy Rodriguez told her. His crew had been skeptical of a young black woman running a construction project, but 6 weeks of her knowing every detail and solving problems before they happened had won them over. What about the electrical on the third floor? That's the holdup. Previous owner did some creative wiring. Nothing dangerous, but not exactly up to code either. Kiera made notes on her tablet. Every delay cost money, but cutting corners cost more in the long run. Her phone buzzed. Grant, board meeting moved to 2 p.m. Can you make it? On my way. She handed her hard hat to Jimmy. Call me if anything changes with the electrical timeline. You got it, boss. Boss. 6 months ago, she'd been serving coffee to men who didn't bother learning her name. Now she managed a crew of 20 skilled tradesmen who trusted her judgment. The drive from West End to Buckhead took her through 3 different versions of Atlanta. Neighborhoods where kids played in community gardens. Business districts where glass towers scraped the sky. The city her company was trying to bridge, one delivery route at a time. Grant's office building reflected her image as she walked through the lobby. Professional blazer over jeans, work boots swapped for heels, hair pull. The elevator carried her to the 40th floor, where she'd become a familiar face. Rachel greeted her with genuine warmth now, not the polite distance of their first meeting. They're waiting for you in the main conference room, Rachel said. And Ms. Monroe, you have dust on your jacket. Kiera brushed off the construction residue, grateful for the heads up. Details mattered in rooms full of people looking for reasons to doubt her. The conference room held 8 people, Grant's senior team, plus 2 potential investors interested in replicating the Morrison model in other markets. Sorry I'm late, she said, taking the seat Grant had saved beside him. Construction waits for no one. How's the timeline looking? Asked David Chun, Grant's VP of Development. Second floor's ahead of schedule. Third floor's got electrical issues that'll add about a week. We'll still hit our opening date if the inspectors cooperate. She connected her laptop to the room's display system, pulled up photos from the morning site visit. Here's where we are today. The images showed transformation. Walls that had been graffitied and broken now clean and structurally sound. Spaces that had been dark and dangerous now filled with light and possibility. Impressive progress, said one of the potential investors, a woman from Charlotte named Sarah Martinez. But I'm curious about community buy-in. How do you ensure local residents benefit instead of getting displaced? Good question. Kiera clicked to her next slide. We've hired 60% of our construction crew from the local community. We're partnering with community college programs to provide job training. And we've committed to keeping 30% of warehouse space reserved for businesses with less than 20 employees. That sounds idealistic, said the other investor, a man from Birmingham whose name tag read Robert Kane. What about profit margins? What about them? Kane looked surprised by her directness. Well, surely those restrictions limit your potential returns. Kiera looked at Grant, who nodded for her to continue. Mr. Kane, let me ask you something. What's the long-term value of a project that extracts profit from a community versus one that builds wealth within it? I'm not sure I follow. When we hire locally, that money gets spent at local businesses. When we train people for better jobs, they become better customers. When we keep small businesses competitive with giants like Amazon, we preserve the economic diversity that makes neighborhoods stable. She clicked to a financial projection slide. Our profit margins are lower in year 1, but our customer retention is higher. Our operational costs are lower because we're not fighting community resistance, and our long-term growth potential is stronger because we've created sustainable market conditions. Kane still looked skeptical. That's a very optimistic view of business. It's a smart view of business, Grant interjected. Ms. Monroe's approach has generated 3 times the ROI of my previous retail properties. The meeting continued for another hour. By the end, Sarah Martinez was ready to move forward with a Charlotte location. Robert Kane was still asking questions about realistic profit expectations. After everyone left, Grant and Kiera remained in the conference room. "Kane's not going to work out," Kiera said, packing up her laptop. "Probably not. Does that bother you? Not everyone's ready to think differently about business. We'll find investors who get it." Grant moved closer, loosened his tie. "You were incredible in there. Just doing my job." "No, you were doing something much more important. You were changing how people think." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. They'd been careful about maintaining professional boundaries during business hours, but moments like this made it difficult. "Grant, I know, professional space." But he didn't step back, and she didn't ask him to. "How's your evening looking?" he asked quietly. "Why?" "Because I like to take my business partner to dinner. Celebrate today's progress." "Just your business partner?" His smile was slow, warm. "That depends on whether she says yes." When was the last time someone celebrated your professional wins like they were personal victories? When work success felt like shared triumph? Comment about the person who cheered loudest for your achievements. Kiera looked at Grant standing there in his expensive suit, asking her to dinner like it was the first time, and realized something had changed between them. They weren't just business partners anymore. They weren't just attracted to each other. They were building something together that mattered. And maybe that was worth the risk. The Morrison Building's grand opening was 3 days away when Kiera found the file on Grant's desk. She'd come to his office to discuss final logistics, catering, media interviews, ribbon-cutting ceremony. Standard partnership business. But Grant was on a call with investors in Tokyo, and his assistant had waved her in to wait. The manila folder lay open beside his keyboard. Her name was typed across the tab. Monroe, Kiara, background research. Her stomach dropped. Inside were copies of documents she'd never shared with him. Her mother's medical records. The foreclosure paperwork from Detroit. Her college transcripts. Even a credit report from 2 years ago when she'd been struggling to get her business off the ground. Financial records going back 5 years. Employment history. References from jobs she'd held as a teenager. Grant had investigated her thoroughly. The office door opened behind her. "Kiera, sorry about that." The Tokyo investors had questions about. Grant stopped mid-sentence, seeing the file in her hands. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "Known what?" "Don't. Just don't." She held up the foreclosure documents. "You knew who I was before that brunch, didn't you?" Grant closed the door, moved toward his desk. But she stepped back, keeping distance between them. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it." "Because what I think is that you played me from the very beginning." Grant ran a hand through his hair. "I had you investigated after the brunch. After I realized there might be a connection to Detroit properties. You had me investigated. Standard due diligence for any major business partnership. This isn't standard anything." Kiera's voice rose, anger finally breaking through shock. "This is my mother's private medical information. This is personal financial data. This is stuff I never consented to share with you. I needed to understand." "Understand what?" "Whether I was good enough to be your partner. Whether my poor background made me a liability. Whether I had hurt your family worse than I realized." The admission hung between them. "So you didn't know," Kiera said. "At the restaurant that first night, when I told you about losing the house. You already knew." Grant sat heavily in his chair, looking older than she'd ever seen him. "I suspected. The timeline matched, the location matched. But I needed confirmation. And you couldn't just ask me? How do you ask someone if you're the reason their mother spent her last years feeling like a failure?" Kiera stared at him, pieces clicking together. This whole partnership, the Morrison Building, everything. It's guilt money, isn't it? "No. It's your way of making amends for what you did to my family." "Kiera, that's not. How much of this relationship is real, Grant? How much is just you trying to buy forgiveness for something you can't undo?" The questions cut deep because she could see in his expression that he'd asked himself the same things. "All of it is real," he said finally. "My feelings for you, my respect for your work, my belief in what we're building together. All of it. But it started with guilt. It started with recognizing that I've been living in a bubble, making decisions that hurt real people. You showed me that. Kiera looked at the file again, seeing her entire life reduced to data points and financial records. Do you know what the worst part is? She asked. Grant waited. I was starting to trust you, starting to believe this was about seeing my value, not compensating for your past mistakes. It is about your value. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like charity with extra steps. She gathered the papers, stuffed them back in the folder. The Morrison building opens in 3 days. We have 47 small businesses counting on those jobs and a community that believes in what we're building. So we're going to smile, cut ribbons, and give interviews about successful partnerships. Kiera. But after that, I need time to figure out what's real and what's just well-intentioned guilt. She headed for the door. This doesn't change how I feel about you, Grant said. She paused, hand on the doorknob. Maybe not, but it changes how I feel about me. The hallway outside felt like escape and exile at the same time. 3 months of building something beautiful, and now she didn't know what parts of it were authentic. Her phone buzzed as she reached the elevator. Text from Grant. I should have told you. I should have been honest from the beginning. But my feelings for you are real, and so is my belief in what you've built. Don't let my mistakes destroy something good. She stared at the message, then deleted it without responding. In the parking garage, Kiera sat in her car and let herself feel the full weight of betrayal. Not just that he'd investigated her, but that he'd let her believe their connection was organic when it had been built on information she'd never consented to share. But underneath the hurt was something else. Fear. Fear that he was right. That this whole relationship had been motivated by his guilt rather than her worth. That every compliment, every moment of attraction, every professional opportunity had been tainted by his need to make amends for the past. Her phone rang. Dolores from the diner. Baby girl, you sound upset in your voice message. What's wrong? Kiera hadn't realized she called. Muscle memory, reaching out to the community that had raised her when everything else felt uncertain. I think I made a mistake, Dolores. A big one. Come on by. We'll talk it through. 20 minutes later, Kiera sat in a red vinyl booth while Dolores poured coffee and wisdom in equal measure. So he looked into your background, Dolores said after hearing the whole story. Thoroughly. Stuff I never told him. Private stuff. And you think that means his feelings aren't real? I think it means I don't know what's real anymore. Dolores sat across from her. Honey, let me ask you something. When he looks at you, what do you see in his eyes? Kiera thought about Grant's expression during their first dinner, when they danced at the jazz club, when he'd watch her handle the city council meeting. Like I'm valuable, worth protecting. And when he talks about your work, like he's proud to be associated with it. Hum. And when he touches you, heat flushed Kiera's cheeks, like he can't get enough. Dolores smiled. Baby, I've been watching people for 70 years. You can't fake that kind of attention. You can't manufacture that kind of respect. But he investigated me, Dolores, without my permission. Yes, he did. And that was wrong. But the question isn't whether he made a mistake. The question is whether you can forgive it. Have you ever discovered someone you trusted had been keeping secrets about you? When information you never shared was used without your permission? Share below about learning to trust again after betrayal. As Kiera drove home, she realized the Morrison building opening would answer more than questions about their business partnership. It would test whether love could survive the weight of complicated truths. The Morrison building glowed against the evening sky. Every window lit, transformation complete. Local news vans lined the street. City officials in their best suits mingled with community leaders in their Sunday clothes. Small business owners who would soon call this place home stood with their families, taking pictures in front of something they'd helped create. Kiera arrived early, needing time to center herself before facing Grant and the cameras and the celebration of something that now felt complicated. She'd spent 2 days avoiding his calls, responding to business texts with minimal professionalism, focusing on opening preparations while her heart wrestled with hurt and confusion. The building looked magnificent, exposed brick walls restored to their original beauty, modern fixtures that honored the space's industrial past while serving its technological future. 47 small businesses ready to begin operations Monday morning. Whatever her personal feelings about Grant's deception, this project would change lives. Real families would earn better wages. Local entrepreneurs would compete with corporate giants. The community would benefit regardless of the complicated motivations behind its creation. Ms. Monroe, a reporter from Channel 2, approached. "Can we get a quick interview before the ceremony starts?" Of course. The interview was easy, familiar ground. Questions about job creation, community impact, the logistics technology that would make small businesses more competitive. Professional territory where she could speak with confidence about measurable results. "What about your partnership with Grant Ellison?" the reporter asked. "How has that collaboration worked?" Kiera's chest tightened, but her voice stayed steady. "Mr. Ellison brought resources and vision to support what our community was already building. It's been an educational partnership for both of us." Educational. Safe word that revealed nothing. She spotted Grant across the crowd, shaking hands with city officials, charming investors, playing the role of successful developer. But even from a distance, she could see tension in his shoulders, could tell he was searching the room for her. Their eyes met across the space. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Councilman Richards approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the grand opening of the Morrison Community Business Center." Applause filled the space. Families from the neighborhood, workers who'd built this transformation, entrepreneurs ready to begin new chapters. This project represents what's possible when vision meets community engagement, Richards continued. When business development serves people instead of just profit. More applause. But Kiera barely heard it. She was watching Grant watch her, both of them maintaining professional smiles while everything personal hung unresolved between them. "I'd like to invite our project partners to say a few words." First, Grant Ellison of Ellison Properties. Grant took the microphone with the confidence of someone who'd given hundreds of speeches. But when he looked out at the crowd, his usual polish cracked slightly. "6 months ago, I thought I understood business. I thought success was measured in profit margins and growth percentages. Then I met someone who taught me that real success is measured in communities strengthened, families supported, opportunities created." His gaze found Kiera in the crowd. This building exists because Kiera Monroe had a vision of what business could be when it serves people instead of just shareholders. Everything good about this project came from her understanding of what this community needed. The applause was genuine, warm. But Kiera felt exposed, like Grant was using public appreciation to say things he couldn't say privately. "Now I'd like to introduce the woman who made this possible, Kiera Monroe." Walking to the microphone felt like crossing a minefield. Grant's hand brushed hers as he passed the mic. Just brief contact, but it sent electricity through her skin. "Thank you," she said, looking out at faces she'd known for years. This building represents something important. The idea that business can lift communities instead of extracting from them. She spotted Dolores in the crowd, Jimmy Rodriguez and his construction crew, the teenager who'd shared her food truck dreams at the community center. But more than that, it represents what happens when people invest in each other. When we stop seeing transactions and start seeing relationships. The words felt pointed, personal. Grant would understand the double meaning. 47 businesses will call this place home. That means 47 families with better opportunities. Hundreds of jobs that pay living wages. Economic development that strengthens our community instead of displacing it. She looked directly at Grant for the first time. That's what happens when business partnerships are built on trust, transparency, and shared values. The crowd erupted in applause, but Grant's expression showed he'd heard her message clearly. After the ribbon cutting, after the tours and photographs and interviews, the crowd began to thin. Local families headed home with children who'd stayed up past bedtime to be part of history. Business owners made plans for Monday morning move-ins. Grant found Kiera on the building's loading dock, where she'd escaped for a moment of quiet. "We need to talk," he said. "Do we?" "Kiera, please. I know I screwed up. I know I should have been honest about the investigation from the beginning." She turned to face him. "The investigation isn't what hurt me most." "Then what?" "It's that you let me believe our connection was organic. You let me think you saw my value naturally, when really you were responding to guilt about the past." Grant stepped closer. "That's not true, isn't it?" The guilt made me take that first meeting seriously, yes. But everything after that, my attraction to you, my respect for your work, my belief in our partnership, that was real. How can you be sure? Because I've been attracted to successful women before. I've partnered with brilliant entrepreneurs before. I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. The admission hung between them in the night air. The file in your office had everything, Grant. My mother's medical records. Financial information I've never shared with anyone. How am I supposed to trust you with my heart when you couldn't trust me with the truth? Grant's voice was quiet, raw. Because I was falling in love with you and terrified you'd hate me if you knew the whole story. When someone you're falling for keeps secrets that affect your past, how do you separate genuine feelings from guilty motivations? Comment below about learning to trust again after complicated revelations. Kiera looked at him, standing there, vulnerable and honest, and everything she'd wanted him to be 2 days too late. I need more time, she said finally. Grant nodded, accepting defeat. The building is beautiful, Kiera. Whatever happens between us, you should be proud of what you've built. As he walked away, Kiera realized she was proud, but she was also heartbroken, and she still didn't know which feelings were worth fighting for. 2 weeks after the Morrison building opening, Kiera received an offer that changed everything. Marcus Chin knocked on her office door with news that should have felt like victory. Tech Logistics International wants to acquire your company, he said, settling into the chair across from her desk. Full buyout. $50 million. Kiera set down her coffee cup, processing numbers that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. They want to scale your model nationally. Use your community-focused approach in 12 major markets. You'd stay on as VP of Community Development, maintain your current team, keep operational control of the Southeast Division. And Grant, his partnership gets bought out. Clean break. You'd have complete independence. Independence. The thing she'd fought for her entire career, now offered on a silver platter. What's the timeline? They want an answer by Friday. Due diligence would take about a month, then the acquisition closes. After Marcus left, Kiera sat alone in her office, looking out at the city where she'd built everything that mattered. $50 million was life-changing money, generational wealth, the kind of security she dreamed about while watching her mother work 3 jobs. But it also meant walking away from Grant, from their partnership, from whatever complicated feelings still existed between them. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. This is Jennifer Martinez, COO of TLI. Looking forward to working with you. Your reputation for authentic community engagement is exactly what we need. Authentic community engagement. The phrase made her smile and cringe simultaneously. Corporate speak for something that felt much more personal to her. Another text, this one from Grant. I heard about the TLI offer. We should talk. She stared at the message for 5 minutes before responding. Nothing to discuss. It's a good opportunity. It is. You deserve it. But I'd like to explain some things before you decide. Explain what? Why I really had you investigated. The whole truth this time. Against her better judgment, she agreed to meet him at the coffee shop in Virginia Highland where he'd first started learning to see beyond his own world. Grant arrived first, claimed their corner table, ordered her favorite drink before she walked in. Small gestures that showed how well he'd learned her preferences. Thank you for coming, he said as she sat down. You said you had something to explain. I did have you investigated because of Detroit, but not the way you think. Kiera waited. After that first dinner, when you told me about losing the house, I spent 3 days going through every property my holding company acquired in 2014, trying to remember if I'd seen your mother's name, if I'd known there were families behind the paperwork. He pulled out his phone, showed her a photo of a document. This is what I found. It was a letter, handwritten on line paper. Her mother's careful script requesting a payment extension, explaining about the hospital bills, promising to catch up as soon as she returned to work. She wrote to you? To the holding company. It never made it to me personally. Probably got processed by some junior associate who saw 3 missed payments and followed standard foreclosure procedures. Kiera's throat tightened, seeing her mother's words preserved in Grant's phone. But there's more, Grant continued. I found this too. Another document. A cashier's check made out to Denise Monroe for the full amount of the outstanding mortgage balance, dated 1 week after the foreclosure was finalized. You try to pay the mortgage? I tried to reverse the foreclosure. As soon as I realized what had happened, I wanted to fix it, but your mother had already moved out. The check came back uncashed. Kiera stared at the documents, her understanding of the past shifting. Why didn't you tell me this at the restaurant? Because it doesn't change anything. Whether I tried to fix it afterward or not, I still participated in a system that destroyed your family's stability. Buying my way out of guilt doesn't make me less responsible. So the investigation was me trying to understand how much damage I'd really done. Whether your mother had recovered financially, whether she'd ever gotten proper medical care, whether you'd been able to finish your education. Grant's voice was quiet, heavy with regret. What I learned was that she never recovered. Not emotionally. She spent 10 years feeling like she'd failed her children, and I was part of the system that made her feel that way. Kiera felt tears threatening, pushed them back. The partnership, the Morrison building, everything we built together, it started because I wanted to prove that business could be different, that resources could serve communities instead of extracting from them. And us, what we felt for each other. Grant met her eyes directly. That was never about guilt. That was about recognizing someone who challenged me to be better than I'd ever been. They sat in silence, the weight of complete honesty settling between them. The TLI offer is incredible, Grant said finally. $50 million, national expansion, complete creative control. You should take it. Should I? You built something beautiful. You deserve to see it grow without being complicated by whatever this is between us. Kiera studied his face, seeing resignation and loss and something that looked like love. What if I don't want it to be uncomplicated? Grant's breath caught. What? What if I'd rather fight for something real than accept something easy? Kiera, I've spent my whole life being careful, making safe choices, protecting myself from disappointment. But you know what I learned for watching my mother? Grant shook his head. I learned that the biggest risk isn't getting hurt. It's missing out on something worth having because you were too scared to try. She reached across the table, took his hand. I'm still angry about the investigation. I'm still hurt that you weren't completely honest from the beginning. But I don't want to throw away something real because it's complicated. When have you had to choose between something safe and something that scared you but felt right? Between security and the unknown possibility of love? Share below about the biggest risk you took for someone who mattered. Grant's fingers tightened around hers. Does this mean you're turning down $50 million? This means I'm betting on us instead. 1 year later, the Morrison building hummed with success. Kiera walked through the loading dock at 6 a.m., checking overnight deliveries and greeting the early shift workers. The same routine she'd maintained for 12 months, staying connected to the actual work that made everything else possible. Morning, boss called Maria Santos, who managed inventory for 3 small restaurants. We got that organic produce delivery you were tracking. Perfect. How's the new route optimization working? Shaved 20 minutes off delivery time. Our customers are happy. Kiera made notes on her tablet, pleased with improvements that seemed small but added up to significant cost savings for businesses operating on tight margins. The TLI deal had fallen through. Not because she turned it down, but because their vision of community engagement had turned out to be corporate marketing speak after all. They'd wanted her brand and reputation without her values and methods. Better opportunities had emerged. 3 other cities had reached out about replicating the Morrison model. Grant Company had secured funding for expansion that maintained local control and community ownership. She took the elevator to the 3rd floor, where her office overlooked the warehouse floor below and the neighborhood beyond, a view that reminded her daily why the work mattered. Grant was already at her conference table, reviewing architectural plans for the Charlotte project with their newest partner, Sarah Martinez. "Morning," he said, looking up with the smile that still made her pulse quicken after all these months. "How's Charlotte looking?" "Good." Sarah found a building in the noted district that's perfect. Similar bones to Morrison. Same kind of community support. Sarah spread out financial projections. "Timeline has us opening in 8 months if permits go smoothly." They learned to navigate their professional and personal relationship carefully. Clear boundaries at work, complete honesty about conflicts of interest, decision-making processes that protected both the business and their partnership. It hadn't been easy. 6 months of couples counseling had taught them how to fight productively, how to separate business disagreements from personal hurt, how to build trust after complicated beginnings. "There's something else we need to discuss," Grant said after Sarah left. "Oh," he pulled out a folder. Not the invasive background check that had caused so much pain, but something else entirely. "I've been working on this for 3 months. Wanted to get all the details right before showing you." Inside were legal documents establishing the Denise Monroe Foundation for Community Economic Development. Seed funding of $10 million. Board of directors that included Dolores, Councilman Richards, and 5 other community leaders. Grant. Kiera's voice caught as she read her mother's name across the letterhead. "The foundation will provide microloans to small businesses, fund job training programs, and support community development projects across the Southeast. Everything your mother believed business should do." Tears she hadn't expected gathered in her eyes. The first grants go out next month. 25 entrepreneurs who can't get traditional bank loans, but have solid business plans and community support. This is incredible. It's what she would have wanted. A legacy that lifts people up instead of just making profit for investors. Kiera looked at Grant sitting across from her, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt instead of the expensive suits he'd favored when they met. Success hadn't made him careless with money, but it had made him thoughtful about how he used it. "There's one more thing," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. Her heart stopped. The ring box was simple, elegant, nothing flashy or ostentatious. When he opened it, the diamond caught morning light streaming through her office windows. "Kiera Monroe, you've spent the last year teaching me that the best partnerships are built on equality, honesty, and shared purpose." He got down on one knee beside her chair, looking up at her with eyes that held everything they'd built and everything they still wanted to create. "Will you marry me? Not because I want to acquire you or merge our assets, but because I want to spend my life building beautiful things alongside the woman who taught me what beautiful really means." She looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the foundation documents bearing her mother's name, at the view of the community they'd served together. "That depends," she said, fighting back tears and laughter simultaneously. "On what? Are you asking Kiera Monroe, the business partner, or Kiera Monroe, the woman who's completely in love with you?" "Both. All of you. Every complicated, brilliant, challenging part of who you are." She slipped out of her chair, knelt facing him on the office floor. "Then yes, to building something beautiful together, to fighting for what matters, to loving each other even when it's complicated." Grant slid the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with the kind of intensity that made her forget they were in a professional setting during business hours. "We're going to be late for the 10 a.m. meeting," she murmured against his lips. "Let them wait." "That's very unprofessional, Mr. Ellison. I'm about to marry my business partner, Ms. Monroe. I think professional boundaries are already compromised." She laughed, pulling him closer. "Good thing we're excellent at managing conflicts of interest. What would you say yes to if someone offered you partnership in every sense of the word? When love and business and dreams aligned perfectly." Share below about saying yes to something that scared and thrilled you equally. Through her office windows, the Morrison building buzzed with activity. Small businesses thriving, communities strengthening, families building better futures. Everything her mother had believed was possible when business served people instead of just profit. And now it had a foundation to ensure it would continue long after Kiera and Grant were gone. 2 years later, Kiera stood in the same Buckhead Country Club ballroom where everything had started. But this time, she wasn't serving coffee. This time, she was the keynote speaker for the Atlanta Business Development Awards, wearing a dress that cost more than her mother's monthly rent but felt earned rather than given. Grant sat at the head table, watching her with the same expression he'd worn that day when she'd schooled him in front of the live stream cameras. Pride, admiration, and something deeper that still made her pulse race. 3 years ago, Kiera began, looking out at an audience of Atlanta's business elite. I stood in this same room, serving coffee to people who didn't bother to learn my name. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Some of them remembered. Tonight, I'm here to talk about what happened when one of those people learned to see past assumptions about worth and value. She found Grant's eyes in the crowd, smiled at the man who'd apologized by changing his entire approach to business. The Denise Monroe Foundation has funded 347 small businesses in the past 18 months. Those businesses have created over 2,000 jobs and generated $47 million in local economic activity. Applause filled the ballroom. But numbers only tell part of the story. The real story is about what happens when we stop extracting from communities and start investing in them. She clicked to her next slide. Photos from a Morrison building, the Charlotte expansion, the newest project in Birmingham. Maria Santos went from working 3 part-time jobs to owning a catering company that employs 12 people. Jerome Washington turned his food truck into a restaurant that serves the neighborhood where he grew up. Keisha Johnson's logistics app now helps 50 small businesses compete with corporate giants. More applause, but Kiera wasn't finished. These aren't feel-good stories about charity. These are examples of what happens when business development serves people instead of just shareholders. She looked directly at the blonde socialite who'd made jokes about her shoes 3 years ago. When you invest in communities, they invest back. When you create good jobs, you create good customers. When you treat people with dignity, you build loyalty that can't be bought. The room was completely silent now, hanging on every word. My mother spent her life believing that business was something that happened to her, not with her. She cleaned offices for companies that never knew her name, served food to people who never saw her face, worked for wages that kept her poor despite working harder than anyone I've ever known. Kiera's voice strengthened, filled with everything she'd learned about the difference between charity and justice. She died believing she'd failed her children because she couldn't leave us money. But what she left was worth more than any inheritance. She taught us that your work is your worth, that everyone deserves dignity, and that success means lifting others up. She paused, looking out at faces that represented billions of dollars in investment capital. The question isn't whether you can afford to invest in communities. The question is whether you can afford not to. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Afterward, at the reception, people approached her constantly. Investors wanting to discuss community development projects. Entrepreneurs seeking advice about scaling social impact businesses. Politicians asking about policy recommendations. But the conversation that mattered most came from an unexpected source. Councilman Richards, who'd questioned her competence 3 years ago, pulled her aside near the bar. Ms. Monroe, I owe you an apology. For what? For doubting whether you could separate business from personal feelings. For suggesting that dating your investor compromised your judgment. Kiera accepted a glass of wine from the bartender, studied Richard's face. What changed your mind? Results. You've delivered everything you promised and more. The Morrison Project has revitalized West End without displacing longtime residents. Property values are up, but so are wages. New businesses are thriving alongside established ones. He paused, looking slightly embarrassed. I was wrong to question your professionalism based on your personal life. That was biased talking, not business sense. I appreciate that, Kiera said. But you weren't entirely wrong to be concerned about conflicts of interest. How so? Mixing business with personal relationships is complicated. It requires constant communication, clear boundaries, and absolute honesty about motivations. She looked across the room at Grant, who was deep in conversation with potential Charlotte investors. But when it works, when you find someone who shares your values and challenges you to be better, the results can be extraordinary. Richards followed her gaze. You two seem to have figured it out. We have good days and difficult days, but we never have days where we don't respect each other's competence. The reception continued past midnight. By the time most attendees had left, Kiera found herself alone with Grant on the club's terrace, looking out at the Atlanta skyline glittering below. How does it feel? Grant asked, loosening his tie. How does what feel? coming full circle. Standing in the same room where you served me coffee 3 years ago, but this time as the guest of honor. Kiera leaned against the railing, thinking about the journey from that humiliating morning to this triumphant evening. It feels like justice, she said finally. Not revenge, but justice. Proving that worth isn't about where you start, but about what you build. Grant moved behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. Your mother would be proud. I think so too. They stood together in comfortable silence. Two people who'd found each other across impossible circumstances and built something beautiful from complicated beginnings. Ready to go home? Grant asked. Home. The brownstone and West End they'd bought together. Walking distance from the Morrison Building and the community center where Kiera still volunteered teaching business skills to young entrepreneurs. Ready, she said. But as they walked toward the elevator, Kiera turned for one last look at the ballroom, where a waitress had once served coffee to a man too privileged to see her worth. Tonight, that same woman had been celebrated for changing how an entire city thought about business, community, and the intersection of profit and purpose. What would it feel like to return to the place where someone once dismissed you, but this time as the person everyone wanted to hear from? Share below about your own full-circle moments of proving your worth. The elevator doors closed on the past, carrying them toward a future built on equal partnership, shared values, and love that had survived the complicated truth that sometimes the best relationships begin with